so we have some of the cast members, the director, here to talk a little bit, and I'll also prepare some questions. Hope you all have something to ask the crew. Just a little bit about each of our panelists. Espro Sharp instigates through art. Her films include The Healing Passage, slash Voices from the Water, Life is a Saxophone, semi-animated short, Picking Tribes, and merging poetry and film in Back Inside Herself, Channeled, and her recent short, Blood Bank. Gale Fulton Ross speaks art with painting, portraiture, printmaking, and sculpture. Through commissions and artist residency, she has created work in Italy, France, Tanzania, and China. And her many portrait subjects include Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Jackie Robinson, and Toni Morrison. Roberto Miranda, bassist, has performed and recorded with jazz artists Kenny Burrell, Horace Tapscott, Bobby Bradford, Seal Taylor, Charles Lloyd, among many others. His own group, Home Music Ensemble, blends African American, Latin, and experimental jazz. Benin Lemus creates as poet, educator, and librarian. Her work online and in print includes the poetry collection Dreaming and Mourning, Morocco, Journal of African Poetry, and Torch Literary Arts. Benin is on the faculty of UCLA's Extension Writers Program. And a quote from her: "Even in our deepest moments of suffering and grief, dreaming can still be present in our mourning." All right, so Benin will be moderating a discussion with the participants. I hope you all caught some of the cameos or appearances of some of the panelists. Roberto on double bass, Gale Fulton Ross doing a live portrait painting of Kamau. So please welcome them all. Let's give them a round of applause, and we'll take it away.
We have Roberto here tonight? Oh, yes. Okay, wonderful.
I think he...
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to have him sit right over there. And let's just take a breath. Yeah. That was magnificent. And I caught so much more this screening than in the previous screening. So we're just going to wait a moment until Professor Miranda shows up. Okay. So I'm Benin Lemus. I'm so happy to be here. And let's give our producer, director, writer, visionary, Espro Sharp, another round of applause, because that was magnificent. And we have Gale Fulton Ross, who is the visual artist, bringing a lot of what we saw to life through painting. Round of applause. And the soundtrack to the magnificent words of Brother Kamau Daáood, Roberto Miranda on double bass. So I'm really honored to moderate. And while we're here listening, if you have questions, we're going to do a Q&A in a few moments. So you can break out those phones and put them in notes or something, just so you have them, so you want to ask a question. But I first want to know how, because this whole group of people are absolutely dynamic, and it's very rare that you get to work with such luminaries over time. So I want to know how you all came to know and work with one another.
Before I answer that, I want to acknowledge that one of my crew members, Steve Farrier, is in the audience tonight.
Let's give it up. Thank you for being here.
Steve did second camera and gaffer. And then when we did the bonus part on the DVD, he was a cinematographer. And in addition to working for the NFL or one of the sports networks and Universal, he's done a lot of traveling around the world. And he was sent by National Geographic to Chad, where he began to work with the pipeline, but he also began to work on his own, teaching some of the filmmakers there. So thank you for being here tonight, Steve. That's a part. So I came to New York. I came from New York to Los Angeles in '75, and I worked with some of the baddest musicians in New York backing me. So I'm trying to decide, how am I going to do that here? And when I went to hear Kamau, Miguel Miranda was backing him, and I said, that's the person, because not all musicians know how to work behind poets, and this man does. And so as soon as I got a chance to work with him, I was begging, Kamau sent me. And then he began to work with me, so that's how I met him. Gale and I knew each other from New York, we'd known each other from the 70s, and have used her art in other pieces, and I was just blown away by her artwork, so I was kind of following her around a little bit and watching what she was doing, so that's how we met.
So speaking of that, all of these connections, how did this film come about? And talk a little bit about producing it, financing it, distributing it. Especially now, there was no social media, so it was definitely a DIY. Of course, you need a crew. And why did you want to make this film?
I had made one. I think this is my second film. I had only made one short film before this, but in the community, people were saying CDs would come out, and people said, "Kamau ought to have a CD." And then there'd be a film come out. Somebody ought to do a film on Kamau. Kamau ought to have, And when we're saying '84, this is before iPhone, before iPad. This is before home computers. So you got to think in that, that capacity. So the second film I did had won a prize of $1,000, and I said, I will definitely use this money to make my next film. I can probably make a film on Kamau for $1,000. 23,000 is what it ended up costing back in 1984.
And no GoFundMe or
no, there was
Indiegogo, none of that.
But what there was, which was unique, there were a lot of people in the community who wanted to see something done on Kamau. And so 3 of those people gave me $1,000 each. And then I got other donations from the community. I got a grant from the consortium, the Black Consortium, which at that time was the Black arm of PBS. When I finished the film, they did nothing with it. They didn't like it. Nothing with it. And then I set up an investment where I asked people, if you will invest with the film, I will return your investment, but I don't know when. And a lot of people signed on. So when the film was finished, I had about 30 people that I had to give back their investment. So I started with the lowest ones first, get rid of that, until I got the list down to about the top 5 or 6, who are still getting checks, actually. It took me about 15 years to finally pay off everybody, because when you finish the film, that's not the end of that $23,000. It then has to be duplicated. You have to have marketing. You have to enter. People don't understand that when films are shown in film festivals, they charge the filmmakers an entry fee. And very often, you're on your own to even get to that city to promote that film. And you have to provide posters. And you have to provide a digital, particular kind of copy. So these expenses of filmmaking do not stop. That as long as that film is alive, there's another expense. Right now, they have something called DCM, and independent filmmakers are struggling because each one of them costs $200, $300, $400, depending upon the length of your film. So that's part of the funding, but it was really a community effort, and I don't know if I know it was too quick, but we're in the Wanda Coleman Theater, and in one of the shots of the audience at the concert, Wanda Coleman and her husband are sitting in the second row. So they were there that day.
And so speaking of collaboration, I'm going to ask each of you, I'm going to pass the mic, what is the key to artistic collaboration, especially when your role is not the primary role? How do you see your role when you're collaborating? And another way to ask is, how do you see your part in artistic ensembles, such as what we see in the film?
Just talk. I don't have to hold a button. For me, collaboration is key. As an artist, I collaborate with my subjects. But in this case, when a friend asks you to participate in something that you know that she's going to work hard at and she's good at. And it gave me an opportunity to um, be involved in something that I actually loved. I love African American classical music and Kamau. I'm from Boston, so I'm going to mess up names. But his work, his sound, I remember Gil Scott-Heron, and I'm from the time when, before we had all of this equipment now, where the people were the music. So I just loved it. For me, it was a necessary collaboration, and it started my career. In a sense, it laid the tracks for who I am today.
For me, the collaboration is really about love, respect, patience, and the musician staying in the woodshed until he gets a call for the gig.
Can I get you to expand on that just for a quick moment to say, so when do you know, because there's this, at the concert, we hear you at the beginning, but then there's a long time before we hear you again. How do you know? How do you know when it's time to show up again? When they've called you from the woodshed, how do you know?
Well, Sandra just walked up to me and said, hi. And so I knew that then. And Kamau and I both were part of UGMA, Union of God's Musicians and Artists Ascension, and Papa, Pan-African People's Orchestra. So we had regular communication at rehearsals and get-togethers and things like that. So I would get the call, what Horace Tapscott would say, or would entitled "The Call." When you got the call, you got the call.
For me, collaboration is finding somebody who's willing to share their talent. Like it's like making a cake. You want to put the butter in and the milk and the cream, and you want all of it to blend together. And so sometimes you're working with someone and you understand it's not the right vibe, but when it is the right vibe, you feel it, and you're able to create, and you're able to disagree, and you're able to experiment, and let's try this a different way, and it feels comfortable. It feels doable, and then out of that, things will spring that you could not have imagined. And when you're having that experience, then you know you're on the right track. And when you find those people, you want to hold on to them. And by the way, Kamau and Roberto are still performing in the Pan-African Orchestra. They're both still active members. Yeah.
One of my favorite lines in the film is, he says, if you can see it, you can be it. And so for each of you, when you are creating, before, during, after, what do you see? Take us through either the spiritual experience you're having through that creative process. Take us through what you are seeing, what you are being in your moments when you are creating.
For me, it's the freest times of my whole existence is to be in my studio doing my work. I'm doing exactly what I said I would do when I was 6 years old. I've never had another job. I am not formally trained. I taught myself. We all know, though, that it's a natural ability that I have because it's a gift from a higher source. And so I believe to this day, and I have believed this all through, that no matter how tough it got, I would never suffer. And I never have. I've been broke, though. And then somehow the universe says, okay, get her. And then I'm fine again. but I'm in my happiest place doing my work, yet it comes from a deep, deep sadness. And I'll just say real quick, my father, his name was Herman Fulton Jr., designed the fin on the Cadillac. I was about 10 years old when that car came out. Well, it came out in '59, I think. And, but he had already created a car. He was what they call a black dream car builder. And he designed that in a little town in Malden, Massachusetts, outside of Boston. He built the car because he was a mechanic for a dealership there. And, but he was not a designer. He was not hired as a designer. And this was his dream. And I saw him do it, and he brought two cars together, an Oldsmobile parts onto a Cadillac, and then the fin, which did come out in a different form, I think like 48 or something like that. He took the fin and created it to what you and I would recognize, and it went on to be quite something. Well, he drove the car for less than 3 months, because it was his car. And they came and got it. Suits from General Motors, his bosses, they said that he couldn't have that car because anything he did belonged to them. And then the man who took the car, who owned the dealership, drove the car for 13 years. And he sold the patent, or whatever he called it then, the design, to General Motors, who said that it was done by Harley Earl, some member of the design department. And I never forgot that. I never forgot that they also took the design paper, the drawings, because I used to sit and draw with my father. They took them. He was a quiet man. He never spoke about it, wouldn't speak about it, and took his life at 58. Because of the car, no, but because of who he was in America. And when I work, I don't work for myself. I work for my people.
Thank you so much. So, to answer the question of where I am when I'm doing what I do and how to get there, I have so much love for the people that I work with, love and respect, as I mentioned earlier, that I just want to support them. I want, bass players, although we also have roles as soloists and band leaders and composers and out front people, we our job is to support the people that are out front, which means we have to lay a foundation. So when Kamau is out there saying what he says, my job is to say, I got your back. I'm here. I believe in you. I support you. And I must say, I've passed up gigs with poets because one day I found myself playing behind a poet that was saying some things that I really disagreed with. It was like 180, and I said, wait a minute, what am I doing here? So now, when a poet asks me to do a gig, I very respectfully ask them to submit the work so that I can read it, and and then I know I can support this, and I've actually said I can do these. I can't do this one over here at all, and so I just want to support them. Really, that's where I'm at.
Mhm. Well, I spent, and I'm sure some of you in the room have been through this, but I spent many years feeling guilty about being a poet, like there were some more important things I was supposed to be doing in the world. I finally got over that. It helped a lot to let that go and understand that being able to do this kind of a work as a writer and a filmmaker is a gift from the higher spirit, from the ancestors especially. And so in my process, I always speak with the ancestors, ask them to open the path. And I find, and I share this with other artists, if you're doing the right thing in your art, the universe will start magnetizing things toward whatever that project is that you're working on, whatever that goal is. So if that's not happening, you maybe need to stop and check why you're doing what it is that you're doing. The other thing is I've learned to try to see, as I'm creating, see it through your eyes, because I may see the whole picture and all the colors and everything, but that doesn't mean it translates. So I'm always looking at how is this going to translate to you, so that when you come to it, you get something from it. Not everybody's going to get the same thing, but it can't be so deep or so vague or so whatever that you're not sure why what you're not getting anything from it. So that's one of the things that I try to be aware of.
So I'm going to dovetail on that because I nearly burst into tears because I'm thinking about what you vulnerably shared with us about your father and how that is the story of so many Black people in America, people of color in general, women, all kinds of marginalized people. And in this film, I had a very palpable sense of who we are as artists and who we bring to our practice. So with that, you kind of already started to answer, S. Pearl, but feel free to expand, all of you. What are the ancestral practices that you draw upon? Because if you know Kamau Daáood at all, and if you've never seen him perform live, like this is magnificent. And I'm not sure how old he is now, but he is still very much present and just as sharp and I want to make sure I go back to some of the other topics that I want us to talk about, like some of the themes in his poetry. But very much present is this idea that we draw upon the ancestors near and far. And so I'd like for you, if you feel comfortable, to talk about what ancestral practices do you draw upon to do this work that you do?
Well, first of all, I want to share that Kamau was the first poet I met when I came to Los Angeles. And our friendships started there. I have an altar, and sometimes I will put little pieces of things that I'm working on that altar. I, like even coming in this evening, I asked the ancestors to be present. I'm on a first name basis with some of them. As a matter of fact, my first film is Back Inside Herself with Barbara O. She was Yellow Mary in Daughters of the Dust, and she made us a transition very recently. So I want that. I've learned to listen. I've learned to listen because very often messages that you need to know are coming to you. You have to be ready to accept them and know how to hear them. And it varies. It's not the same for everyone. For myself, the most important messages and answers to my questions come very first thing in the morning. And if I follow what I hear, I'm going to be all right. If I challenge it or decide, that doesn't make sense, I'm not going to do that, doesn't work out right. So over the decades, I have learned to listen and also sometimes to wait for the information that I need. And I kind of live by the philosophy that all of the information I need will be revealed to me. It may not be revealed at the time I think I need it, but when it comes, it's the information that I needed at that time. So it's a process. it's a process that I think we each develop over time.
Thank you. My first music teacher was my father, Rafael Luis Miranda. Both my parents were born and raised in Puerto Rico. And my dad taught me and my brother percussion. I don't know if you noticed, but on when Billy Higgins was playing, I was actually playing congas. It was my first instrument. I still play and teach. I draw upon that. I still have my father's bongo. They're like at least 50 years old, and I draw on that in terms of my physical ancestor. My great grandmother, her name is Lala. I often think of her, but I also draw on my spiritual ancestors, like Abraham. I'm currently in the process of composing some music for the prophets from the Old Testament.
Beautiful.
And for the past 40 years or so, every single piece that I've written has either been for someone here that I love, like my wife, someone whom I respect, like Thelonious Monk. But most of the work has been for the Lord. And that's the best way I can answer that question.
That's a harder question for me in the sense that, you know, I've always had an abiding faith, but I'm not religious. I've just always believed in something bigger than myself, because other than that, I wouldn't know why I could draw. And I could draw. And even when I tried to go to art school for a bit, the teacher there said, if I were you, I'd leave. Or I have to teach you to draw like me and everybody else here, and I don't want to take from you what you have natural. So I did leave and study with other artists. But in studying with other artists, I learned certain things about other cultures as well as my own. And it opened my eyes to a lot of things. But recently, I read where each one of us has X amount of ancestors, like your mother's 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 father's 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 generation. So I figured I have about 4,300 ancestors that somehow instilled in me the need to make marks on paper that will provoke a thought. And then I have all these people I love who have died or who have transitioned, who are on the other side of the door, who keep rooting me on when I think, I just don't know if I want to keep doing this. And because, it gets harder and harder with new technologies, young people coming out of school. I mean, I recently was told I was too old for a grant. I mean, I used to get grants they're giving them to millennials.
Emerging.
Yeah. And so, you start saying, well, you know what, maybe I'm just going to sit down. But then this is what I hear. Do the work. I don't care how difficult I think my day is, or I'm not going to do it. When that clicks in, I do the work. That's all I can tell.
Thank you. So I have more questions, but perhaps you all have questions. So I'm going to leave mine on the page. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? I'll ask another question, and then if you have a question, raise your hand. I can see from where I'm seated. I can see. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions are so good.
I know. Okay, so I'm gonna ask another question. Okay, yes, sir. In the cab, yes.
Ma'am.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. My apologies. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, how were there ever times that any of you wanted to quit? And how did you keep going?
Yeah, I'll answer that first. There was a time when I was playing congas, and I thought, man, these congas are really messing up my hands, and it might get in the way of me playing the bass. And so I said, I'm going to stop playing congas and just concentrate on string bass. And I put the congas in my closet. That lasted about 2 weeks. I honestly, I about tore that door off. Really, because there's no way, there's no way I'm ever going to stop playing congas. I don't play a lot now because I'm doing a lot of teaching and composing, and mostly teaching and practicing. But I've got 7 drums in my studio. Every once in a while, I go in there. So yeah, I felt like quitting, at least on the congas. I don't think I've ever felt like quitting playing or composing or like that. But so I share that.
I don't think I've ever felt like quitting as a writer on a project, but I've definitely felt like quitting on every film. And then you realize that, you've got this grant, or these people have entrusted you, or they've helped out, and you can't disappoint them, so you gotta finish. So it's about you learning to take a break. And when I'm coaching artists, I say, step away from it. Step away from it for a while. Give it some space. Go catch up on your laundry. Go let your friends know you're still alive. Go see somebody else's movie. Just step away from it and then come back, because you'll come back with a different relaxation, a different view, and a different energy. And we need to do that. We need to sustain the project, but the project can't be sustained if we don't sustain ourselves. And it's rarely about just money. It's about time and energy, and is anybody going to like this, and does it make sense, and all of those questions we ask ourselves. So you just have to stay with it. Yeah. One of my films, The Healing Passage, Voices from the Water, started out as a project on one person that I figured I could finish in about a year, and it ended up being a project that included 12 people that took 10 and a half years to finish. But when it took that time, someone said to me, divine timing. When you have finished the project, when the world is ready for it, you will have the project ready. And I stuck that on my notebook, divine timing. I stuck it on my bulletin board. And you know how you have things in your house that they're there, but you kind of not see them? And I turned around one day and I looked at this and I realized, I looked at the date, and it had been on my bulletin board for 5 years. And I had just started editing. So, yeah, divine timing.
Hulu has a feature that you can pause your subscription. So don't quit. You can pause, and then you can go do something else in the meantime. And then when you're ready, when the universe says you're ready, and you feel that, then you come back, and then you come right back. Question. Yvonne, did you have a question?
Yeah.
He's also our timekeeper and program coordinator, so I thought, oh, okay.
Well, it's a question about this film and other films. One, I'm curious who we worked with to edit this film, and what the process is to create a pace for each of you. If this one specifically, there's a back and forth between poetry and performance. The filming itself took about 3 days, but yeah, you could elaborate on the editing.
I was shooting in 16 millimeter film, and the first day we took Kamau out on the street, did all of those scenes. And the second day was the live concert. And then about a month later, we did about a half a day of pickups where we did the art that Gale created, the portrait of Kamau, and so we actually had some shots of her in the film working on the piece, her hands in it. So that was a really short shooting period of time for a film that is this long. I worked with Don, I don't forget his name now, he became the head librarian for Warner Brothers Films eventually, but he was my editor, and at that time they had what they called a moviola, and it was a big machine looked like a big humongous thing, and I rented it, and they hauled it up to the second floor, and I got up every morning in my pajamas and I went to work. And then Don would come by on Thursdays and weekends and help me with the scenes that I didn't know enough how to do or needed some help with. And that's how I got it done. Yeah, so it was just a fascinating period because I had not edited, I had not worked on a long film like that before. I so missed that process where you can have one machine or maybe two machines in a room by yourself, period. As opposed to now where you gotta have somebody who has all these machines and all these screens and all these plugs and all these different contraptions, and, it's just, I find it difficult to create, more difficult to create in that period, in that aspect than I did when I just had a quiet room, one machine, and film. Yeah, so, all of us are at the age that we've had to adjust really deeply to technology, and none of us are happy about it. Thank you. We have yes.
I want to know, I know your poetry and your writing. When did you become interested in filmmaking, and what was the process of the journey for you?
I was an actress. I still am an actress, but I was having a very good acting career. And I realized on the sets that the actor was the last person to come into the decision-making process. And I wanted more control over that. And this was back in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, when we were documenting how few Blacks were on screen and how even fewer were behind the scenes, calling the actions. Many people don't know that The Cosby Show, as successful as it was, the first team of writers for that show was all white. So what happens is those people then become the experts on writing Black shows. And Black writers are fighting against them to get to write their own material. So that when I say control, that's the kind of situation that I'm talking about. It has changed drastically, and we have so many Black artists who are showrunners and creating and doing their own things. But back at that time, it was very difficult. So that's why I went into filmmaking. And I actually went in, I thought I was going back to brush up on television. When I was at Bowling Green State University in the 60s, that's when educational institutions that were just beginning to use video to share classes or to have a class being shown off campus. Color television hadn't come in yet. And so at one point I said, in the 80s, I should go back, and color television turned out to be pretty good. Maybe I should go back and catch up on the technology on there. And I went into Los Angeles City College, and I was going to go to the television department, but they had a film department. And I walked in, I fell in love with film, and my agents would call and say, "You have an audition?" I'm like, "Audition? I got a class. I had a film class." So that was my transition.
We have a question in the corner. Yes.
What's for the world, did you say?
Almost everything I do is autobiographical. However, a big part of my practice is portraits that are commissioned. But even that requires that I put myself in my subject's place. So I have yet, even though, I do socio-political work, I do the portrait, and, I do work for exhibition and work for curators. I don't think I've done the one for me. I just haven't had the time. It's like the first painting I ever did, I'm still working on. Because you just stop action and you go to another, you got a subject, you got a project, okay? But that question is very interesting because when I think I want to stop, it doesn't mean I want to stop making art. It means I want to stop making it for other people. So I haven't done it yet. Hope I live long enough.
Oh, thank you. Well, I may answer that question in I don't know if it's a unique. First of all, it's a great question. Thank you. So I'm going to have to get just a little metaphysical. I'll try and keep it short.
Sounds good.
You know, what's for me and what's for the world. When the Lord Jesus was on the planet, he came to call his people, and if the world didn't dig it, well, that's just. I mean, he would have loved for the world to dig it, but a lot of them didn't, and that's on them. So when I compose a piece of music or when I play, I oftentimes will just think of a heavenly audience, and I'm trying to play best I can for that audience and those people that are here on this plane, on this level, who are in tune with that audience. Then that's who I'm playing for, and that's who I am. I find who I really am in Christ. And so when I'm there, then that's cool. But if other people cannot get next to that, that's between them and the Lord.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm still trying to work out the answer. My journals are full of me writing for me. And then sometimes I'll take something from that and try to share it with the rest of the world. Sometimes I'm sitting on something for a long time that I want to write. And it may be that because it's for me and I haven't worked it out yet. But sometimes I can take something that I've worked out for myself and say, okay, now I can try to put this in a shape where it might reach someone else who's going through the same thing or having the same challenge. So it's a kind of up and down either or. There's no set pattern for making that decision. I think it is part of the artist's role to not necessarily reveal your own stuff, but to write or create something that helps somebody work out the same problem that you're working out. They don't have to know that you're having that same problem. They don't have to know what you're going through, but you can write in a way that they hear you, they feel you. There's that shared experience, and then that begins to work for them. And it's very, very interesting. When I watch commercial television now, and the artists, the singers who are releasing songs on Entertainment Tonight, almost every time there's somebody saying, was that about you? Was that your last boyfriend? How did you feel about the song she wrote about you? And they're saying, I didn't write it about them. But there's some concept in our consciousness today that if anybody writes anything that seems autobiographical, it must be autobiographical, when sometimes it isn't at all. And so I hope that we're not beginning to infringe on the artist's right and the artist's space to say something that could be anybody's story without getting it pinned into their personal lives. Yeah.
Probably one of the downsides of technology, mass technology, is that we're so privy to everybody's lives, those who choose to share it, that we think everything is about the person that you see. You don't have any of that interiority, right? And so that's where you have to use that discernment and also be very macro, not think that everything is so finite right there, but things are much bigger. I'm not sure how much time we have left. I have a question, Yvonne, I wanted to ask. Okay. Oh, yes, you go first.
Thank you so much. This is an amazing evening. Upstairs, the gallery is named after Mike Kelly, and he said, art is making your problems other people's problems. It could be art is making your joy other people's joy. And the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. And I think what you guys brought to me this evening was what's called conscious breathing. And that's what art is you're conscious of breath. We're all on automatic pilot, and we don't consciously breathe. And that's what I felt through his poetry in your film. What I really want to compliment you with, S. Pearl Sharp, is the sound on your film was excellent. For being 16 millimeters and running it through so many generations. We didn't watch it on a 16 millimeter projector tonight, and we heard what you were trying to transmit to us through the poetry and the music. So thank you for having good sound on your film.
My sound mixer was Russell Williams, who went on to win an Academy Award for mixing for Dances with Wolves, and the second Academy Award for mixing A Soldier Story.
Glory.
Eric Albert did a great job here.
Glory, for mixing Glory. I'm sorry, he's won 2 Academy Awards. Then he retired from the business and went to DC to teach. And now he's retired and gone to Vegas. And can I just share this story? This is Russell, my sound guy. He was working for free on a woman's film at AFI, and he said for some reason she came in with a different numbering system for the scenes that is used in the entire industry. And he said about midnight he had just reached the end of it, and he walked over. He said, "Miss Director, the scenes go this way because they work. Your job is between action and cut. Action and cut, you got it? The rest of this was worked out 100 years ago and it still works."
There you have it. So one of the themes in the film, I feel, with Kamau's poetry, the music, the art, the dancing. Shout out Lula Washington. Did everybody notice that? Lula Washington? Amazing. And her whole family is fantastic. I mean, yes, Lula Washington. Her son, with her husband Erwin, she's a UCLA grad, is Kamasi Washington, who works with Thundercat and like all of this like really incredible experimental Black classical music.
And she was the choreographer for Avatar.
Yes. And her daughter is the assistant artistic director at the Lula Washington Dance Theater on Crenshaw and Coliseum. Tamika Washington, amazing. So I just want to shout out like all of the people who are in this film, and you just never know the people that you're going to work with. But what I also want to say is that tomorrow, I believe, is the 30th anniversary of a free South Africa. And this is the first, so the first democratic elections were held 30 years ago tomorrow. And of course, we hear Stephen Biko. So I don't know if it's the end, but I do want to ask you all, because you all have lived lives and you are living lives and you have seen a lot. And your art has been obviously, at least as the way I have interpreted, has been a part of, your life experience. So what is the role of the artist, you as an artist? And how, in light of the unrest that we have seen and we're experiencing for decades. I mean, I remember I was in high school during the apartheid movement. So I remember when it existed. I remember when it fell. And of course, we have Black Lives Matter. I mean, we can just go on and on. But how do we use art to tell stories, to speak of freedom, liberation? I just want to preface that Gale Fulton Ross has a fantastic TEDx Sarasota that you should see. And I cribbed this quote. Creativity exists when we desire to solve a problem with relevance and imagination. So my question to all of you is, how do we use that art? How do we use, how do we do it? How do we use art to tell these stories, to work with the unrest that we are experiencing either directly or indirectly?
Talking about the people or the artists?
So how do we as people, but how do you as how do we as a collective?
That's interesting. If we could do it as a collective, we wouldn't be in this situation we're in right now.
That is also true.
But creativity thrives in chaos and ambiguity, in the sense that right now, if you embrace, first of all, everybody's creative. You're born with it. It's just a matter of how you use it. Everybody's not going to be an artist, a musician, a performer, but there's many other ways you use your creativity. It's the way you get dressed, it's the car you buy, it's the colors you like. That's it. You're born with it. So the only thing I can say is that you have to embrace the issues, and then you have to give some thought to what you can do where you stand within how you think. But the creativity aspect of it is the fact that collaboration, conversations can help change things. There's a lot, though. We do need to all try to do it somehow together, and that I can't answer.
Next. In 2 Kings verse 3:15, Prophet Elisha is asked to give God's word to the people. And so he was with a group of people that some of whom were not cool, others who were. But before he prophesied God's word, he asked for a musician. 2 Kings 3:15 says, bring me a musician or bring me a minstrel. If there's a prophet on the planet today who's in that situation, I want my phone to ring. So that is the highest way in which I feel that my art can serve.
I'm going to pick up on that because Alex Haley, when he was doing Roots and he went to Africa, he said they'd made all the arrangements. They had the boat, the tour guide and everything. And then they said, no, we have to get the musicians. And he said, why do we need musicians? And the guy said, nothing happens without the musicians. Nothing. So they had to have drummers with them because the drummers had to drum before any dialogue, any exchange of information could take place. And so I think of that sometimes because that's our gift, that's our function. It's a gift, but it's also a function, it's a responsibility, if you're an artist, to use your art to address the issues. There are already accountants who can't write a poem, so whatever your gift is, creative, if it's cooking, if it's taking care of children, if it's collaboration, if it's negotiation, that's your gift. And that's what you bring to these situations. And I'm also beginning to learn that I have to figure out what I can do. I can't solve this whole Israel, Lebanon, Gaza thing, but there's something I can do to support that part of it that I want to support. I have to figure out what that is and do it. I can't take on the whole thing. And very often people say, it's too big for me, and then they're done. No, it's our job as artists to be there, and that's the power of Kamau. He takes the issues and he puts them in a form that makes us listen and makes us think and makes us evaluate and see something differently or see something that we hadn't realized we needed to see. And that's, that's his strength and his power and his gift to us. And I'm just very grateful that he's still doing it.
Yes.
He's still doing it.
And the indelible nature of art film. I mean, so for this to be a film that is 40 years, it's its third release, and yet so many of the issues, so many of the concepts, the people were just still right here, right? We're in a loop. And I think it's powerful that you all are here to talk about your work, your process, and talk about what inspires you and what keeps you going. I want to thank you. Do we have time? Are we done? What's going on? Okay. I want to thank everybody so much.
Thank you.
Gale Fulton Ross, Roberto Miranda, and S. Pearl Sharp. And of course, we want to thank you, Beyond Baroque, for joining us this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Ivan. Thank you to Ivan for pulling this together.
Yes, Ivan, master
Thank
communicator,
you.
his
Thank
emails.
Yes, thank you.
No, yeah, thank you all for coming. We have books of Espo Sharp. The DVD has some extra footage of the film as well, so check it out. And we also have books of Benin. And yeah, if you want to come back tomorrow and you want it to be free, there's a secret to that. Become a Beyond Baroque member. All right. So, all right.
Thank you for supporting independent
Yes.
artists and cultural centers.
Yes.
Keep it real,
Thank
Venice.
you.
Love y'all.